This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
I was trying to get it how I live. I want them dead presidents. I want to pull up, head spin, get it, get flat. I got 6 jobs, I don't get tired. I don't get
And we are still not tired on this week's episode of Two Bad Hombres. I am your host, Vito Geronimo Churco, alongside nobody, at least for right now. I do have a stellar guest, as John Macaroon is still on vacation, has the week off, and will be back next week. Anyways, recording this podcast remotely, and I was joined earlier in the week by a great guest and Michigan Sports Legacy Conservancy Executive Director Jim Stark, formerly of the Michigan Sports Hall of Fame. He's a great sports historian, knowledgeable on so many different aspects of Michigan sports history, Detroit pro sports history, so many different sports topics, and it comes to Detroit and Michigan sports. And he joined me for 50-plus minutes to discuss a myriad of topics, including the Michigan Sports Legacy Conservancy, about how it came to be, why it came to be, what its mission is, about its great fall fund development drive as well. This initiative is pushing until the end of this year to raise money for the Michigan Sports Legacy Conservancy, as their honorary chairman for the drive as well is a legendary Michigan sports broadcaster, Jim Brandstatter. So the Michigan Sports Legacy Conservancy is doing tremendous things in our community to preserve the legacy of Michigan sports. And with all of that being said, the website for the Michigan Sports Legacy Conservancy is mislc.org. Once again, the website is mislc.org. And you can find out more about the Michigan Sports Legacy Conservancy on that very website. And there you'll find the press release as well for that Fall Fund Development Drive. So, without further ado now, here is my chat with the Executive Director of the Michigan Sports Legacy Conservancy, Jim Stark. And it is Jim Stark of the Michigan Sports Legacy Conservancy with me today.
Vito, you got
Jim, how are you doing?
Right? So that puts you up on my list right now. You got the name.
Awesome.
It's a lot of syllables, a lot of words, but you got it right. So right away, you're at top of my list.
Well, I did something right here, Jim, to start off, and I appreciate you and your time here on this week's episode of Two Bad Hombres.
Well, I've heard nothing but good things about you. Now, if I missed the bad things, I get that.
You probably missed out on some bad things.
I've heard nothing but good things about you, and you've worked very hard to kind of develop your niche in local sports, and that's hard to do, and especially in the new world, But congratulations, because like I said, I think you've done a really nice job, and I know from what I've heard about you, you have a very solid reputation.
Well, thank you very much, Jim.
Now, what did I miss? What did we miss?
Well, there's some bad stuff you probably missed,
what's
too.
What's the truth, yeah.
Which, we're not going to talk about on this week's episode of Two Bad Hombres. Right. But anyways, you're the executive director as well of the Michigan Sports Legacy Conservancy.
I am.
Now, specify, what does that role exactly entail?
Well, you kind of have to go back a little bit in my history. I ran the Michigan Sports Hall of Fame for many years, and this is really a derivative of that. In that when I was at the Hall of Fame, we had we were trying to develop a broader platform to reach people in a different way than just honoring sports figures. Okay, so we had a plan to preserve the legacy of sports. Okay, you're a pretty smart guy, but you're pretty young. Are you aware that there's no organization in the state of Michigan that is a goal or mission is to preserve the history of sports?
Did not know that, and there should be. So now you guys are coming through in the clutch to fill that void.
Well,
right?
If you want to talk about the history of fine art, there's the DIA in Detroit. There's the Art Institute up in Grand Rapids. If you want to talk about performing arts, you got the DSO. And all those, as much as they perform and they present of these fine arts, they also preserve it, right? In sports, other than the teams and the schools do, but they preserve what they do, right? Michigan State's not going to worry about what Michigan does or what Central did. So there's a void, and we saw that void years ago, and that was one of the goals, was to fill that void with an organization that would be responsible for preserving the legacy of sports, especially in a sports crazy state like Michigan. Like there's other states that have far greater infrastructure for preserving sports, museums, and states like Georgia that don't have nearly the sports legacy that Michigan does, right? So we're lagging behind. We saw that hole. We've been trying to fill it. When I left the Hall of Fame, in addition to the preserving the legacy of sports, we also want to use sports as a tool or a platform to help educate and reach kids, right? Because as the times change. We just spent 20 minutes talking about former coaches at Eastern Michigan, right? Well, who's going to remember all those things, right? I had to look them up, right?
Not many young kids right now.
Right.
I know remember that.
And another thing is, in today's age of kids, they're on their devices. They're not going to, if they go to the Hall of Fame in Cooperstown, their dad dragged them there, right? And they can't wait to get out, to get back on there. So the way sports is viewed and appreciated in the past has changed. So one of our goals is to figure out a way to interpret sports from the past and make it relevant to the youth of today.
So now, why do you
Make sense?
think there was no entity in place before this to fill that void, to preserve the legacy, to get the youth more intrigued as well with the history?
Several reasons. I think there was never anyone that stood up and said it's time for this. Like when the DSO wanted to restore Orchestra Hall, there was a couple of people that stood up and said, "We want to raise the money." It takes a leader. It takes a pioneer, right? For whatever reason, there's never been a pioneer that says this is important for sports. Who knows why? Right? Because it's a sports crazy state. So I've been pushing that that rock up the hill for almost 20 years now, and I'm still not there. When we started the Sports Legacy Conservancy, that was one of our founding missions, was to push that rock up the hill. So there's no answer to that question. There's no reason. It's one of those things where a lot of people say there isn't. I didn't. You know what I mean? So it could be no reason, or it could be many reasons. But the bottom line is, we don't want to see it continue.
So as a 26-year-old myself, I see a lot of my peers.
I would have thought you were like 35 or 40. Man, you haven't aged well.
Well,
I'm kidding. You look like a kid for crying out loud.
I feel really bad.
If you shaved, I think you were like 16. So.
I think if I shaved, I would look really young. High school age.
Believe me, I'm jealous.
Well, thank you very much. But anyways, I see my peers, and the younger generation as well, that don't get into sports and for sure know nothing about the history of Michigan sports and beyond. Right. So how do we get them more involved with it and knowing the history of Michigan sports?
Again, I'll give you an example of one of the projects we worked on. There's no more venerable location in the state of Michigan, if you're talking about the legacy of sports, than the site of Tiger Stadium, right? Now, how old did you say you were?
26.
So you went to games at Tiger Stadium?
I did, as a young boy. I do a little bit.
Okay, but so you're good. You're all right. So anyone younger than you ain't going to remember.
No.
You remember a little bit.
A little bit at least.
So, if you follow the history of what happened there, the stadium, Tigers moved to Comerica Park, the stadium stays vacant. The Corktown group tries to save the stadium, eventually gets torn down. They find PAL, the Police Athletic League, to come build their headquarters and restore the field. Okay? So now we got a nice new field, the headquarters of PAL. But if you go down there, have you been down there yet?
And I have.
Okay. If I know where it's at. Okay, because I remember if someone's 20, they don't know what Tiger Stadium was, right? So we worked with them to help tell the story of what came before on that site. We developed 2 showcases that are in the concourse area of the PAL ballpark that tell the story of the history of the ballpark and the teams that were there. Because now, if somebody's there to play a game, and they're 8 years old or 10 or 12, and they got time between the game, they might go look at that. Well, I see this. So now that's a very passive way to do it. But there's people that either A, remember it, or B, maybe their grandfather tells them about it, or their dad. So that's one way to do it. But then the other way is to have programs and seminars to help make those connections. And sports is great because you can use sports in just about any way you want to. Historically, you can use it from a social aspect. You can find some story in sports to connect to just about any social issue we face today.
And now with the state of these teams being so lackluster, as you know, the 4 major pro sports teams in Detroit, does that hurt, you think, the interest level of the young generation to try to gravitate towards the sports?
It absolutely does. But it makes our mission all the more important because now, tying back to those successful years, the Red Wings, the Pistons, the Tigers, the Lions, of course, another story. but so what we do by keeping those stories relevant, and those when Alan Trammell and Lou Whitaker, or when Alan Trammell and Jack Morris went in the Hall of Fame 2 years ago, there was a great chance to tell the story of the '84 Tigers to a whole new generation didn't know about it. Okay, so that's what we want to do, is we want to make sure the stories and the lessons that they can learn remain relevant. Now, do we know how to? No, we're still working out ideas. We've got some ideas for having some programs, but by raising the question though, and by asking the right people, that's how things get changed and how they happen. Does that make sense?
It does.
Okay.
And speaking of programs and trying to raise money, I know you guys are as well as a nonprofit, and that's always a difficult thing to do as a nonprofit,
it's a challenge
right?
for any nonprofit. If you remember the Art Institute of Detroit, when the city of Detroit went bankrupt, they had to they raised $1 billion basically to help save the DIA. And that's where the money went, because they didn't want the city to have to sell it off. So that was a central point of what the bankruptcy was about. So same thing with sports. We want to be able to preserve the history because that is valuable, because you can learn from it. You can enjoy remembering the sports that you grew up with. The lessons you can learn from the people that created the sports. One of the things that we want to do under our program and under our mission is to do these life histories. Okay, and we've done 5 so far. We've done the life histories of Lem Barney, of Jerry Green, Detroit News columnist, Al Fracassa, legendary high school football coach, Ray Scott, former coach of the Pistons, coach of the year, and Mickey King, who was a Olympic diver in 68 and 72, and went on to be the first woman director of athletics at any of the 5 military academies. She was in the Air Force. So all 5 of those, and they're about 2 hours. The stories that come out of those, the layers of stories you find out that you didn't know about unless you talk to that person. For instance, Mickey told us about how in 1972, I know that's like ancient history for you, my young friend here, but 72 in the Olympics in Munich, you know what happened there, right? With the Israeli athletes being killed. She was a diver. The organizers in Munich wanted to cancel the Olympics, end it right then, right? Mickey was part of a contingent of athletes that went to them and said, no, we want to continue. Why we're here is why we want to continue the Olympics. We don't want it to be driven off because of, and they ended up continuing the Olympics and finishing them. But how would you know that she was part of that?
Need the stories told. So you guys are trying to tell these stories of these historic athletes as well that people don't know about enough, especially the Olympians. It seems like at times.
And the fact that she was the first. I think want to say without the first woman at any of the 5. That's. So unless you and the same thing but every one of those 5 people told us stories. Jerry Green told the story about sitting alongside Joe Namath at the poolside at the first Super Bowl.
My God, and what he saw,
right?
He talked about.
And so unless you get those stories from them and preserve them, they're gone forever. So that's one of the missions of doing this. But also now, how do we take those stories and make them relevant to today's youth? That's the big challenge.
And then raising money, once again, is so integral, right? For all of these nonprofits.
Everything costs money unless you got a money tree in the back.
I wish I did. I like looking back there. I always look to see
any money trees, but
I always look to see back there something's growing.
Yeah, but it's a fact of life. So we launched our first fundraising campaign.
And what's it called? The Fall Fund Development Drive, right?
Jeez.
Hey, I'm trying to sound smart here. I did my homework a little bit.
I love a guy who does his homework.
Yes, thank you.
The Fall Fund Development Drive is going to run. It's running now through the end of December. And it's all web driven. You know, all of the donations are on the website, and I'm not very savvy, so trust me. But I know that much. It's all done on the website, but you go to our website at mislc.org, and it takes you right to the page, and it tells you all about what we're trying to do and why you should support us. But again, it's this, it's the story is don't support us because we're good guys and we're doing a good thing. We should, but because if we don't do it, who's going to? And when every time someone dies, we lose somebody. When Gordie Howe died, when Ted Lindsay died, when Ernie Harwell died, those stories, sure, we've got some interviews, but I'm telling you, these 2-hour in-depth interviews tell you more than those ever would, right? So we don't want to lose anybody else without having their story both commemorated and preserved.
And speaking of being able to tell stories, your honorary chairman for this Fall Fund Development Drive is Jim Brandstatter.
Jim Brandstatter.
He's a legendary broadcaster, former Michigan player, play-by-play man now on the radio for U of M
football. And there's no
football.
better guy in sports, any level of sports, than Jim Brandstatter. You've been in this business a little while, right? I'll bet you found some people that you might have had one image of, and you meet him and you find out
totally
ain't quite
different
like that,
image.
Right?
Absolutely.
Right? Jim Brandstatter is exactly the person that you think he is on the radio. He is as good a guy as there is in sports, and he's on our advisory board, and he was kind enough to serve as our honorary chair. But he exemplifies what we're talking about. First he was a player, grew up in Lansing, right? His family was the Michigan State family. I don't know if you knew that or not.
I didn't know that. That's interesting.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That's really
His family,
interesting.
He was a heretic to go to Michigan. So he goes to Michigan, and he plays under Bo Schembechler, right? So there's a whole connection right there. Bo's first team. He was on Bo's first team. And then he goes on to become a broadcaster in the state of Michigan before we ever knew him. It goes to the state University of Michigan, becomes the football and the Lions. He's living, breathing what we're talking about. Lived his life in Michigan, sports, has met everybody. Think of all the people he's met along the way at Michigan. All the legendary names, the Bob Eufers and all the coaches and the players.
My boss, John Wangler. I mean, a shout out to him. All these different players and iconic figures in Michigan football history, right?
He's a living example of what we're trying to do. And again, by us working to preserve it, it's not just to preserve. We don't want to think of what we're doing as keeping things on a dusty shelf. That's not it. We want to keep the things, but make them viable and interesting to today. That's the challenge, and that's why it takes people with expertise. That's why it takes money to develop this expertise, to hire the people to help tell those stories in a compelling and interesting way.
And Jim Brandstatter, I got Jim Stark here, but there's so many famous Jims that are Michigan, including yourself.
And
then the head coach now. How about the head coach now, Jim Harbaugh?
Yep.
And there's similarities between him and Bo, perhaps. Harbaugh played at Michigan.
I wouldn't say similarities.
How many similarities?
I would say ties.
More than similarities.
I think Jim Harbaugh could not be more different than Bo Schembechler. Jim Harbaugh, I think, is a product of today's world. You know what I mean? He's not a millennial, obviously, but his attention span is different. His priorities are different. You know what I mean? And I'm not saying he's a bad guy, but he ain't Bo Schembechler. And there never will be a Bo Schembechler. There'll never be a Biggie Munn, because it was a different era. You know what I mean? Lloyd Carr always says, he said, if he had his way, you'd go back to football games being played at noon on Saturday. They play football games on Wednesday nights now?
Thursday, Friday, every single night. Tuesday, matching on Tuesday nights.
The money, first off, the media, TV has changed everything. But now the money is so... The MAC, why does the MAC put a game on Wednesday night at 10 o'clock?
Money from the TV networks.
Exactly.
CBS, SN, ESPN, they're going to televise and pay them.
So why does they move a Michigan football game from 1 o'clock to 7:30? Money. And the coach. Now, Jim Harbaugh gets all that, right? Lloyd didn't get that. Bo didn't get that. It was that transition of today. So while Jim Harbaugh may have ties to that era, I would not compare him to the era because it's so different. Coaches went to one place. You didn't think about leaving. Now, if a coach stays somewhere, 5 years? He's a
long time.
Long
like
tenure
Harbaugh now,
right?
Year number 5, right? Seems like a long time.
Every year, every place he's gone, 5 years.
Yep.
Right.
And then he's out.
So Bo, frankly, Mark D'Antonio is kind of a throwback to go somewhere for 12 years. You're not going to see that. Now, if you're Nick Saban and you go to Alabama and you win.
Sure, you win making a ton of money. You're going to say that, right?
Right. But by and large, the business is I move up. So you don't have the long-term loyalties that you did years ago. To answer your question about Harbaugh, I don't see similarities between them. I see them as both Michigan men, but not really the way they do things.
Now, is Harbaugh a fit though for this program? It looks like he might go 9-3 and lose to Ohio State again and become 0-5 in 5 years against his arch nemesis.
He's a fit from a strategic standpoint because he's a Michigan guy. But if you're at Michigan and you can't win a big game.
Against OSU, your arch rival, right?
Well, or a ranked team in general.
Right.
You don't fit anywhere. If you're one of the top, Michigan always prided themselves at being a top 10 program, no worse than top 20, right? Well, if you're at that level, you can't lose 9 out of 10 games to ranked teams. So is he a fit at Michigan? He certainly is, from a profile standpoint, but nobody could succeed. Look at the coaches, even Rich Rodriguez wasn't a horrible coach. He's a bad fit at Michigan. But he may have been as good a coach as Jim Harbaugh, but he's a bad fit. Jim's a good fit, but is he a better coach? I don't think so.
And you brought up Mark D'Antonio. How about him and East Lansing? Now, he's been there for a decade plus, like you said, winning as head coach in the history of the program.
Great fit.
How about right now? No. Downtrodden season for the Sparties.
His time is coming. Again, Mark D'Antonio is a throwback. He's 63.
Yeah, older than Harbaugh.
Oh yeah, a generation older. But he never has been a good fit for today's football either. He's more like Lloyd, But he's adapted, But it's look, the game changes, and yes, coaches change, but you can only change so much, right? I think the game has started to pass D'Antonio by. I think he's run his 12 years is a great run. And you gotta be relevant to the players you're trying to recruit, and maybe sometimes you can't be anymore. But he's a great football coach, and his mark. I think people appreciate him at State more when he's gone than now.
I think so too. Long term, 5-10 years down the line, but you have to be willing to adapt.
Yep.
Can you speak about that with these coaches, even with these players?
Well,
and collegiately in college football for sure.
I'll go beyond that. Even in the pros. You have to adapt to the players now. The days, I'll give you a great example, the Tigers, okay? You a baseball fan?
I am.
Okay.
Huge one.
So you suffered with me all this year, right? Cabrera can't play first base anymore, right? You got a guy who can hit the crap out of the ball and can't play anywhere in the field, right? You know what I'm talking about?
No,
right?
Absolutely.
Who am I talking about?
I mean, Miguel Cabrera, but who else?
No, the right fielder.
Christian Stewart. Christian Stewart can hit a little bit.
No. They're star. They're a star in waiting. I'm giving you the lead.
I'm trying to think now, actually. Victor Ridge plays center field. I'm thinking right field.
No,
right
the guy
field.
that traded the Cubbies. I'm giving you all these.
Nick Castellanos, who couldn't play.
Yeah,
Correct.
right.
Never had a position. You're right.
Right. Okay.
Never had a position.
Now, what would have made sense is to move him to first base, right?
Yeah.
He didn't want to move to first base. So guess what? They didn't move him. What? Am I not paying you $9 million or what?
To go play wherever. If I tell you to go play there, that's your point,
that's
right?
The difference in today's game. Nick Castellanos doesn't want to play first. They don't make a move, right? So it's not just college. It's the pro. Look. Basketball goes out saying LeBron James, who coaches whatever team he's on.
He's a player coach. He's a real coach of that program.
Right.
Real coach of the Lakers right now, not Frank Vogel.
So that's changed so much from 20, 30 years ago. But you made it Sparky Anderson?
That's right.
Let a
he would
player
have quit. Well, the old school manager, Jim, it seems like, is out the door now. Jim Leland was the last of that kind.
I was telling someone this story the other day. We were watching the World Series game, and there was a pitching change, and I think it might have been Scherzer coming out, and he took the ball and he gave it, and I said, when Sparky Anderson was manager, his rule with the pitchers, you put that ball like it's an egg in my hand. You don't slap the ball in there, right? Sparky would never have tolerated it.
Would not have accepted that at all.
Never.
Jim Leland, I still remember, he kind of was kind of the same cloth.
See, Jim was,
last of that kind,
really,
why
right? Jim Leland didn't retire because he couldn't manage baseball anymore. Look what he did with the World
Team
Classic.
USA and World Baseball Classic.
Right?
Won a championship there.
He was tired of putting up with some of the crap from the players.
Even Verlander. Do you remember? I still remember one time what you're talking about with Scherzer and his manager, Dave Martinez in Washington, where Verlander did it to Leland. Leland didn't like it and let him hear about it in the postgame. Even though Verlander, great ace, stellar dude, Hall of Famer right now in the future. But he still wanted to tell him, I'm the manager. You're not the skipper here. I'm the boss of this team.
And he's the last of that generation.
I think so, too, at this point.
All these guys that have the big, thick computer full of metrics.
Analytics,
war.
Right? And I love war. I love the numbers, but
I get it,
there's still something more to it,
but
right?
That's why these guys... I'll give you a good example, is Brad Hombres. He's an analytics guy.
Too smart for his own good.
Right?
How about the players? How about dealing with the other stuff, too, right?
They outthink themselves. You can see it on the field, right? So... This is a long-winded answer to your question, which was how have things changed with the coaches and the players. But I think that's kind of the answer. Another thing that's changed things so much is the agents, right? Representing the players, they have as much a say in what goes on as it seems like the general
dictating
manager,
a lot,
right?
The agents. How about Scott Boras? He has 5 of the top 10 free agents in Major League Baseball this offseason.
Good example, okay? What did Garrett Cole do
Houston Astros
right after the game?
Talked about how he's no longer an employee of the Houston Astros.
Said it. Had a Boras hat on. Wasn't out of the Houston locker room.
The game had just ended. World Series just ended, and he was already talking like that.
So that's a good example. We're talking. It's the change in the nature of players, and go back to college for a second. How has it changed now with the college players being compensated? Right. That's
money.
Changing.
California passed that bill.
That's changing. You can't use my likeness. So that's changing that whole relationship between coaches and players. So I don't know that I want to be a coach now at those levels, because it's, you got to be a diplomat, you got to be a politician, you got to be a psychologist. Wasn't Sparky's My Way or the Highway?
It was. Those old school dudes, right? And not just him, obviously, but
again, going back into my legacy, and you know the name, I got to get this name right, of Red Wings. It'll come to me. I should have. He was a legendary coach back in the 50s and 60s, but his motivation was he had bus tickets in his pocket. Said, who gets a bus ticket today out of here?
Bus ticket out, right?
Right.
That saying rung true back then, right?
Jack. It'll come to me. Jack.
See, I won't get it. I'm not as big of a Wings fan.
But that was the day, though. That was, But you don't. And I'm not saying that was great for the players to not have any say. But
so it's good to have some say, right?
It's kind of swung the other way now. When college sports start to, and now I'll even take one step further. Amani Bates,
15, already on the cover of
Sports Illustrated.
I know.
Right? I mean, have you heard they've already talked about moving their home games from Lincoln High School to Eastern Michigan?
Did not hear about that.
The crowds.
My God. I mean, good for Ypsilanti Lincoln and Amani Bates.
Isn't that?
But it's crazy what is.
And
it's high school athletics still, right?
The coach of Lincoln, do you really want to be the guy that benched Amani Bates because he didn't rebound? Or
now, when the crowd's coming out, how many thousands of fans, if they're there to see specifically Amani Bates, you can't bench him. So what if he goes on a tirade or doesn't play well? Can you bench him? But now with the egos of these players too, I'm not talking about Amani Bates. I don't know about him, but egos are big.
How about the AAU guys saying you can't bench my guy? I mean, it's crazy. So I guess we're saying, we kind of got off on this a little bit. We're saying that the power base has changed so much between the athletes and management.
Now I think I know your answer, but this player mobility and just having more rights and power, is it a good thing for athletics? What do you think?
Boy, I'll tell you. I have a mixed mind of that. As a businessman, you should be able to make as much money as you can make, right? But sports needs to be balanced, right? And this was, and in defense of the system, everyone was afraid when free agency came about that everyone would go to New York. It happened for a little while, but now look, the balance is there. Look at it. So that part, I can't make an argument that it's imbalanced, but I think when you invest money in a player, and you should have the chance to reap those benefits. So, boy, that's a tough question, Vito. I'd have a hard time coming down hard either way. As a fan, I'd want my guys to stay. If I'm the Nationals, and I'm looking at losing
Rendon
and
Strasburg, right?
And Strasburg. If I'm the Astros and looking at losing.
Garrett
Cole,
yeah.
And I think there was somebody else, but I mean, that didn't make me feel good, right? As a team, I invested the money in these guys. So I don't know. It's a great question. I think it's a question for maybe smarter people than me.
And how about the loyalty factor? It seems like there's a very little amount to that.
Well,
and you can't totally criticize the guys. They're going to get theirs, right?
What they'll tell you is, they're
going to get paid.
It's loyalty until they want to get rid of me. So loyalty's got to go both ways. So are the teams loyal to the players? Not always. They'll make the move that's best for the team. So, I think the union is important to protect the players' rights. I think, basketball. I like what at least they give the home team an advantage of signing the guy. They can sign him for more. Now I like that. So maybe baseball could do something like that. Whereas if you're Nationals, you could, but they don't have a cap. See, that's the thing.
There's that luxury tax.
Yeah, but that's will baseball eventually go to a cap? I don't know.
To help out the small market clubs?
Well,
the Tigers are becoming a small market club. They're more of a middle tier club.
But then you know what the argument they'd make was? Look at the success of Tampa and Oakland.
And the A's, who are small market clubs, operate in that fashion.
Right.
And
they're doing
making
it.
the playoffs.
Right, making the playoffs. So what do you need? So it's a
Touchy
very convoluted discussion. There are no clear you can make an argument a lot of different ways.
So why can't the Tigers be the A's or Rays moving forward? And how do we fix the Tigers?
Okay,
they need a lot of fixing, it seems like.
So where do you start with a good franchise? Where do you start?
I think with the pitching. And it looks like the bullpen now
beyond
more.
that, no. I'm talking about a good franchise.
A good front office and a good manager.
Okay.
Do we have that in place, Jim?
A good front office,
yes, right first.
The guy
starts
pulling
at the top.
the strings,
yeah.
right? First off, you have to have an owner that's willing to support the team.
Absolutely.
That's first thing, right? Second thing you got to have is a general manager who has a vision, has a plan, and wants to work the plan. He hires a coach that fits with his plan. If you don't do that, what's the point, right? So those are the first two. The owner that supports and wants the team to be successful, a general manager that has a plan, and then a manager that fits in that plan. So get those three things. Now, with a plan, are we going to be a team? Do you remember when Comerica Park
first opened up in 2000?
It was huge.
And they changed it up, the dimensions, right?
Because they were building a team without power guys. Well, so if you're going to have a big field, you don't get guys that are going to hit singles and run bases. You're going to you're going to power hitters. So you have to fit your plan to what you got. Okay, you have to put a lot of money in development, scouting, of the lower, teaching these guys how to have basic skills before they get to the major leagues. It drove me crazy when the Tigers this year were missing cutoff man. How can you get to the major league?
So many miscues,
right? And not know how to hit a cutoff man.
I know.
So something's wrong down
lower
here,
levels in the farm system, right?
Right?
Yep.
So now you got to make sure your farm system is well staffed with good coaches. And maybe this is more than you wanted to.
No, I host a weekly Tigers podcast. I love the Tigers.
I think.
I love diving deep into it.
So you have to have a good staff, and they all got to be the same page. They're all doing the things the same way, right? The Tiger way. All right? Then in your drafting, you got to have a plan for who we're drafting. Are we drafting the best player? Are we going to build pitching first? You got to have a plan, right? The best teams seem to have a plan. Look at Oakland. They draft good players all the time. They get players in different rounds that are contributing, and they fill in with a free agent signing. That's how you build a good team. You build a good team from within.
I agree.
Look at the Astros,
even and the Yankees.
Who are the best? Yeah,
Yankees
who are the
now
best
too.
players in their team this year?
Young, homegrown guys that they drafted themselves. Rendon, Strasburg with the Nats. Look at those dudes.
Now, Dave Dombrowski had a different philosophy. He believed in getting players that were already established and bringing them in, which won him a lot of games.
It did. And in Boston, where he got fired, though, eventually, after winning a World Series.
Right.
Look at that.
But it does cost on the farm side.
It does.
Right? So unless you're really stocking the farm all the time, it's going to... But it worked. The Tigers were very successful for a long time. Right? Now, the Red Wings are an example of a team that was both successful on the ice and kept building the new... But see, they had the advantage before the salary cap. So they could go out and hire the best guy available.
Pay them whatever they wanted to, right?
And everyone wanted to come to the Wings because they knew that, right? So Kenny Holland was massive. Now, when they changed that, and they changed put the salary, that made it tougher for the Wings. Because now you're winning still. You're not getting the high draft picks. And here's the other thing the Wings did. They were the pioneers in Europe. They were signing guys.
Getting those guys first before anybody else did, right? Like way ahead of the curve.
And now everyone's scout. So you got to change. So now it's tougher to win in the NHL, and the Wings have not quite figured out how to make that transition. But Ken Holland moves on. Steve Yzerman is of a newer age, so we'll see. But 25 years of success, that's a pretty good run.
Back to the Tigers. Are the right guys in place to lead the franchise in the right direction?
I don't
become
think
a winner?
so. I think that what has Al Avila shown me? Number one, no one's ever hired him. He's been assistant general manager for 25 years. He's never got a chance to be no one's hired him. If he was there, look, every time you see a bright GM, where do they go? Somebody else grabs him.
Not to Detroit.
Right? But somebody else grabs him. They go somewhere else, right? Was never hired by anybody else. To me, he got the job by default because Dave Dombrowski was let go. His draft picks have been horrendous, right? His decision-making, when to trade a guy, when not to trade a guy. I don't trade Fulmer now, but I do trade this guy. It's been abysmal. Again, look at this. You can't say he's done a good job when the team is so bad, right? Yes, he's drafted some names. We know there's 4 or 5 pitchers, but until they come up, they're just names, right?
And how about the hitters? Lack of position players too, right?
Right. Tell me the position player he's drafted that's making an impact. The only guy was Castellanos, and he couldn't play defense. Give me another guy. There's nobody.
Cameron Maben, back in the day.
Yeah, but
Curtis Granderson, way back.
But they were
way
role
back
players.
in the day.
They made him in star, but they weren't.
And then Maben got traded. I mean, there's not many guys. You're right.
Where's my one from the
Juan Soto, 20-year-old phenom like that. Tigers have nothing.
Where's my Rendon?
Nothing like that, Jim, and they should, right? They should have that.
They've been drafting high for 10 years.
So where are the results?
Right.
Where are the fruits of their labor, right, for the Tigers farm system?
You look at the Houston Astros, you can do a direct line, look, draft pick, right? Then they get the Verlander. But they built their core to the draft, right? How long are you going to give this guy room to say, well, right? And look, I'll give you a great example, all right? You said, can I trust this guy to be a leader, right? Trades Justin Verlander. By all accounts, a very valuable property. Gets 3 guys from Houston, right? None of the 3, was it 3 years later now, have made any impact at all.
Jake Rogers has at least made the majors, but nothing.
Wait.
No impact, you're right.
Impact.
No impact,
the guy
you're right.
comes up, right? Hits what?
Below 200, below the Mendoza
10,
line.
Right?
Yeah,
right?
real bad.
Supposed to be a defensive catcher. Has, 12 pass balls?
Didn't look as good defensively, and that's his calling card.
Right.
If he can't do that, well, what's he going to do, right?
Exactly.
So you're right.
So now, and Daz Cameron, when Jacoby Jones goes down in August, if there was ever a chance to bring him up and see what they didn't bring him up. You know why? Can't hit.
Wasn't ready.
Wasn't ready. Maybe he'll never be ready.
That's the key. Will he ever be ready? You're right. You're right.
How many years are he going to be ready? So now I got Daz Cameron, I got Jones, and I got the pitcher.
How about Franklin Perez? Franklin Perez was a cornerstone of that trade. Hurt. Lingering injuries.
Now, look at the guy the Houston Astros brought up, who was their number 5 hitter this year.
Gurriel?
No, the guy.
Or Yordan Alvarez. Right? Yordan Alvarez.
Why did I get him? He was in their system, right? So either A, I didn't pick the right guys, or I didn't. There's some problem with that trade.
Yeah.
So how else do you judge the guy?
I think an overhaul is needed coming up, and maybe with the front office, because it starts with that.
Did he get enough for J.D. Martinez?
Not at all.
Right?
Duel Lugo and Jose King, middle infielders.
Did he get enough? Who was the other guy he traded? Did he get enough when he traded the pitcher to Boston? Went on to win the Cy Young.
Rick Porcello. Did
he get enough for Porcello? So when's the last time?
Results, right?
You got me going now. When's the last time you heard of Al Avila getting the best of a deal? You heard about Dombrowski doing that all the time.
Always fleeced teams, right?
Oh, God.
Has Avila fleeced anybody? I'll tell you this much, Jim. I think the best trade he's ever made was with the Cubs when he traded his own son.
Yeah, and that was almost by accident,
Wilson,
right?
And it worked out. Yeah, Jamer Candelario, who stunk it up, by the way, this year. Jamer did.
Right. Yeah. So either they're not judging talent right, or they're making bad or something. Or, again, he's not making. Should he have traded Fulmer a couple years ago? Right?
Probably waited too long. Right now he's still on the team and he's been hurt.
Should he have traded Matthew Boyd this year?
Yeah.
But no. So, and that's instinct part of it. You can't teach that. Billy Bean out
the A's.
It's instinct.
Yeah.
Right?
Moneyball over there, right?
So that's a long answer to your question of no, because And then when the owner comes on the radio at the end of the year and say, "Well, we saw progress this year."
Where was the progress?
Okay?
Jim, look at the record.
But that wasn't even the one that got me the most. Wait.
Oh my God!
The comment that got me the most was he said, "Well, you know what? We're going to keep doing what we do, and one of these days we're going to wake up and have a good team." Really?
You can't just wake up or
You're
turn on a
gonna
light switch. Yeah.
You're going to wake
I'd love to do it too. I have many dreams,
so-
but you can't just wake up and have success.
Yep.
It's built over time and organically first, right?
And there's a plan, and you see steps along. You don't just wake up and there it is.
Can't happen.
That's my diatribe on the Tigers.
But I appreciate it. And they need these position players like the greats of years past. Lou Whitaker himself on the modern baseball era ballot.
No, I saw Riley Green hit the summer a couple times out in West Michigan. Looks like a player, right? But Riley Green is
18
not
young.
I think he turned 19.
Right out of high school.
Yeah.
So he has many years to develop still.
Okay, all right. But next year when he's 20, is he ready to be Juan Soto? Right?
I would hope.
Well,
but I think they'll keep him down on the farm to keep developing. That's how I view it.
I don't know.
Right?
But if they hit on him, he should be. Right? You need a Juan Soto. The same thing when Carrera came up for the Astros.
Carlos Correa, Bregman, all those dudes. Even Altuve. Altuve wasn't good right away, but still, all homegrown guys. George Springer in the outfield for them. How about that? Leadoff hitter, hits for power.
Right.
They need power bats,
You need to
too.
develop players and good to have pitchers. I'm glad. I saw those guys down in spring training this year. The two big guys,
Casey Mize
and Manning. Right.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're going to be very, very good. But you know why? I don't have any proof of this, Vito. But you know why I think they didn't bring anyone out of Double A this year? No, Double A this year. They wanted to leave a good team there, so those guys could have a good experience. If they started pulling guys out of there, because Toledo was awful.
And their AAA manager, Doug Mankiewicz, lost his job.
But because they didn't bring anybody up, because they wanted to keep them all together, so those guys didn't have a bad experience. And I give no proof of that, but I believe that. And so. But who else is going to be there to back those guys up? You got to have someone to play defense. Who's the guy that's going to be the next Whitaker? You don't have him.
Speaking of Whitaker,
they keep hoping to get him in a trade.
And look at these trades.
Right?
Lackluster returns. Avila keeps getting fleeced. You made the good point about Dombrowski. He would fleece. The other teams. Avila's getting fleeced.
Exactly.
Opposite end of the spectrum right now for the Tigers.
Yep. Well, look at the guys out there in Major League Baseball. Okay, Suarez in Cincinnati.
Eugenio Suarez. Bad trade for Alfredo Simon. You remember that?
45 home runs this year. The guy in Milwaukee, Hernan Perez. Not a star, but a everyday play.
Better than what they have right now. Well, right now.
So they've got these guys coming through, and yet they go somewhere else and develop. So I don't know. So, but going back to you asked me what I don't see the components anywhere along the way. I think Ron Gardenhire is a good manager. If they'd have hired Gardenhire instead of when they hired Ausmus,
Brett Ausmus
5 years ago,
I agree.
Whole different scenario, I think. But they don't have all the pieces in place from ownership on down.
Starts at the top. Very
Absolutely.
much so. And building a team organically, like the 84 Tigers before they won, they were good on the farm. Had guys like Alan Trammell, Lou Whitaker. Got to bring up Whitaker. The Modern Baseball Era Committee. Put him on the ballot. I hope he gets in now, and I think he deserves to get in,
I want to tell you right now, if you got $20, I'll cover it with 100. He's going to make it. And
is that because of the guilt factor, you think, too? Because they've been guilted into it?
No, not at all. It's the same reason that Morris and Trammell made it, okay? Was because under the old system, or the regular system, who votes? Media guys from all over the country. How much did they see in the 80s before cable? How much did they see those
and
guys?
Detroit baseball.
Right.
Not New York or on the East Coast.
They'd see them
where
when
it
they
would
came
have been
into
different.
town, right?
Yep.
Who votes in this new level now? They call it who votes in that?
It's former players and executives.
Who saw them,
played against them too, right?
So
Which is great.
They appreciated Trammell as a player. They appreciated, so it wasn't guilt. It was asking the right people, right? Same thing with Whitaker. Look at that list. If you see the list of good players.
But Whitaker.
But when and now throw the metrics in, the WAR
his
factor. WAR. Do you know of all the second basemen in the Hall of Fame, he's like 7th?
Better than Ryan Sandberg. I mean,
right.
So many dudes, right?
So it's not guilt. It's getting the right questions and the right answers to the right people. That's what I think.
He deserves it. And it was a travesty. He was left off the ballot after the first year.
The crime was that.
2.5% of the vote.
He was voted
after 1 year.
That was the crime.
That was a crime.
People
really was.
appreciate him, But no, I think he's going to make it because he deserves it. And this is the right. They hit the right system.
How about the Tigers retiring his number?
Oh,
They've waited all these years for Trammell Morris. They had to make the National Baseball Hall of Fame
I'm
first.
okay with that. I'm okay.
Are you with that?
Oh yeah,
okay.
yeah. No, I'm okay. They've set a standard. Mm-hmm. They with only one exception. They only retire players once they've gone in the Hall of Fame. The only exception to that is
was it Ernie Harwell?
Willie Horton.
Or Willie Horton, actually.
Yep.
Really? Because he never made the Hall of Fame.
Yep. Well,
okay.
And he.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, he has the statue.
Yeah, and he does.
But, homegrown Tiger. There's reasons for
and what he did during the riots. Do you think that was a factor as well?
He was a bigger than life.
Yeah.
But they stuck to their plan. They don't, so that's fine. But I think they were being patient because they wanted to see if these guys would make it, and they are. And I think Whitaker will make it.
Now the current Tigers aren't going to win a World Series anytime soon. How about these pro sports teams?
You say that.
I mean, I hope.
Okay? You say.
I want to be optimistic. I'm a huge Tigers fan.
The Astros lost 100 games 3 years before they won. Whatever. So in baseball today, you can turn it around fairly quickly. Okay, but you got to have some core talent, and you got to make good decisions on who you bring in.
Well, Jim, how about the 03 Tigers? They almost pulled it off 3 years later, too.
Could they win in 3 years? Yes. Will they win in 3 years? Not with the way they're going, but they could win in 3 years. With someone that knew what they were doing and could make, yes, you could do it that quickly in baseball now.
Now, how about the pro Detroit sports team that has the best shot of winning right now? Because once again, the Tigers not in the immediate future. Who can, though?
It's got to be the Wings or the Pistons, that's for sure.
Even the Pistons, really?
Yeah. Well, the Pistons are an interesting team because, again, it doesn't take that. In the NBA especially, one guy can make a huge difference. Right? If one of these guys steps up and turns into a real star, if this
Sekou, the first runner,
if he ends
those
up
guys
being
have to grow, though, right?
Of Giannis
and Milwaukee, right?
All of a sudden, you're a different team, right? So I would say I would put the Wings and the Pistons about on an even level par as to the first team. I think with Stevie in charge now, the Wings or the Pistons, I still know who's in charge. Talk about a cluster of leadership. Right, that's the thing working against them is Goris doesn't know what he's doing.
No true GM, by the way.
Right?
Stefanski, I just found this out.
Senior advisor.
Yeah. I think he's made some good moves.
Oh, he has.
But who's a GM? Slap the label on him then, right?
Again, but that's leadership. That's
starts
ownership,
at the top.
Right?
You're right.
But maybe he was smart enough to have someone in place. Forget the title. If he knows what he's doing and they let him do it, he's stumbled into it, right? So if Stefanski knows what he's doing, and apparently he's made some good moves. I'll give them the benefit of the doubt for now. So I would say they're both about equal. I think you're looking at least 3 to 4 years for either one of them to really make a move deep into the playoffs.
You didn't bring up the Lions.
No.
Are the Lions ever going to win a Super Bowl?
Well,
starts at the top once again, and Martha Ford is the owner. Fords have never done anything with that franchise, right?
They had a chance this last time around when Mr. Ford died. They fired Tom Luan. They could have brought in a president with tried and true NFL integrity, experience. I'll tell you the guy. They should have brought in Tony Dungy. He'd have been a great president, right? And they said, we're going to do a national search, right? Okay, I got hopeful. They brought in the Ford family bookkeeper or investment guy.
Rod Wood.
So right away, not only does two things. Number one, it doesn't give you that valuable guy, but it sets the tone. Everyone says, here we go. Same old thing.
Same old lines, right? SOL, baby, right?
Set the stage. I don't care if Rod Wood was the smartest guy in the history of the world. He ain't a football guy, and he set the tone. She set the tone for more of this, okay? Now, you bring in the guy, Quinn. Now, Quinn, by all accounts, they got some good people to help him look for him. They go through
search committee, right?
Yeah. So, great resume. The Lions were the only one that wanted to hire Patricia, right? So, but again, why doesn't it work, right? I think it's right at the top.
Starts at the top. They're never going to win with the Ford family.
You bring in a president that has real bona fide NFL experience, it gives you a different feel. It gives you a different emotion, right? Why were the Wings good? You know why? Because Mike Ilitch was the owner? You think that's why they were good?
More than that, but he cared about winning. I think that was a big component, right? It was a big component.
But what he did there, what he did with the Tigers, is he hired Jimmy Devellano and stepped back.
Hired the right man
He
and then
let
stepped aside.
Jimmy do his frickin' job. I can say frickin', can't I?
Yes, you can.
Frickin' job, right? And the Wings were successful almost from the start. And Jimmy D's still there, right? With the Tigers, he thinks he knows baseball. He's going to run. Him and his buddy, it took them, 12 years?
I think 12.
Before they hired
They got
Dave
Dombrowski, yeah.
See the difference? In hockey, he was a good owner. What did he do? Hired a good guy, gave him the money, and let him do his job. Baseball, I'm going to run it. Difference? Same guy. But look at the results.
I think you and I should run some pro sports teams here in Detroit right now.
If they pay me the money, I wouldn't mind taking the abuse, right? but now look at the Pistons, right? When Bill Davidson hired the team or bought the team, he listened to the wrong people. As time went on, Tom Wilson starts to move up. They bring in Jack McCluskey. Now we got the right guy in there. And Mr. D let Tom and Jack do their jobs, right? So what happens? They build the Palace. They build a team that can win at the Palace. And they have one of the most successful runs of any NBA team for 15 years? Okay? Good owner, good management, and let him do the job. Now, Gorse comes in. Again, Sandy Van Gundy wasn't the right guy, right? So I think it starts with leadership. I'm trying to give you examples of that.
And it makes sense.
That makes sense.
And, you brought up the Palace. Speaking of the Palace, I thought that place was so great. It was closed way too soon.
Well,
to move downtown, I get to move downtown. Makes sense. That's why the move was made.
It was a strategic decision, but it wasn't made in Detroit. You know where that decision was made? The landscape of professional sports. The trend was to go to a downtown setting. Everybody's doing it. You want to be the last one to do it? No. I want to be on the cutting edge. I give them credit for that. I think for basketball it was probably too soon, but they made a decision and they went. I don't fault them for that at all. That was actually, I think, a visionary decision because pro basketball belongs not in the farmlands and
where it's far away from downtown Detroit, far away from Detroit as a city, right? And you're the Detroit Pistons, not the Auburn Hills Pistons.
Now. You can't bring a price structure that worked in Auburn Hills into Detroit.
Here's the thing. I'm going to bring up the prices. You just sagged into a perfect thing I wanted to bring up. How about the prices, Jim?
Well,
they're way too high for a lot of us. Right? I don't care how much money you make.
Well, here's the thing. The way I don't know what the answer is, but the problem I see it as every pro sport now makes enough money from their TV and ancillary revenues to cover all their expenses. So the profit is off ticket sales. So why can't you do more with ticket sales to be more fan-friendly? You know what I mean? Because, yes, it'll cost you money per ticket, but if you win and you get bigger crowds, isn't that better? You know? So, and they do a lot of the discounting now, but let's face it, look at the way they have different pricing for different games, right? You don't pay the same price for a ticket for LA that you do for Oklahoma City in the NBA. They have different levels within the building. Obviously all the. So it's become this dynamic thing, almost like an art. But to me, you still want to drive value to the fans. Where's the value? And that's why when I hear these packages, I can come get 4 tickets and a hot dog that's a good value. Do more of that. Do more of that kind of stuff.
And the Wings and Pistons both have to do that.
Absolutely.
And Comerica Park with the Tigers. Yep. If you're winning 47 games a year, or 50 to 60 games, you got to do something like that to get the fans inside the ballpark.
NFL should be ashamed of themselves for charging the same amount for their preseason games as they do for regular season games, right? Give them those tickets. Charge them more for the season ticket if you want, but give them those tickets because they're not worth it. That's the kind of stuff. What they do doesn't seem to make sense. Right? I get that they got to make money, but be a little fair to the fan because the fan, and I think, I don't know about this, Vito. Maybe you have a thought on this. Are we going from the corporate back to the individual fan now? Is that moving backwards?
I think we have to do that. Because the trend has been going in the way of the corporate.
The Palace was a corporate entity.
Corporately run, corporate direction. And it was way too much of that, right?
Geared towards corporate customers.
Yep. And the suites, right? Having the suites. And people wanted to buy the suites because they were good. Relevant product on the floor, too.
The Palace was the first building that built suites 12 rows on the floor.
Close to the floor, right?
Every suite was up high.
Yep.
So they were
It was
groundbreaking.
innovative. Yeah.
But it was all about the corporate dollar, and it worked. It worked. But you can't lose your. You talked about it earlier. You lose your fan base. Those little kids don't want to come to games. Fine, I can still draw fans now, but in 10 years, is baseball. So it's a bigger concern sociologically for sports than it is anything else.
Jim, I look at my little cousins.
Where's my fan base going to be in 10 years?
That's what I think. I see my dad, who's 62. We're the fans after he passes away. The older generation, the middle-aged people. There's not many like me that are 26 or in their 20s that like sports as much as I do.
And that circles back to the Conservancy. Is one of our ideas is how do we continue to make it relevant so that it doesn't become dusty memories where kids say, "Oh, that's old," And there's ways to do it, right? Because sports doesn't change. The players change, the games change, but sports is the draw. Sports is the same. Right? The dad still wants to take the son to the games. Those don't change. So tapping into that in a modern society where electronics and all the digital media has changed it so much, but there's still ways to do it. Get more creative. You got to be more maybe in tune with what the fans want. But it can be done. Other business. Listen. The auto industry is great. Look at how the auto industry has changed their focus.
And they've had to adapt, right? You have to adapt to the times, right? What the demands are.
Die.
Yeah. And you know what? We've had a beautiful conversation.
Is it over?
It's been a pleasure talking with you, but really quick, before I let you go,
Wow.
It's been a while. 50 plus minutes, Jim.
Wow.
But what do you want to pitch for the Michigan Sports Legacy Conservancy before I let you go?
The big thing is our fall fund development drive that'll last from now right through the end of the year. Please go to our website, mislc.org. Tell you all the information about, and the giving levels can start with $25 all the way up to if you're an eccentric millionaire and you want to give us your inheritance, do it. But the important thing is you're not just supporting us, you're supporting this vision of keeping the legacy of sports alive for not just for today, but so that in 20 years when I'm
42.
60.
No, 42.
We can still have this conversation and sports is still as relevant.
I love it. The initiative, the mission of preserving the legacy of sports long term.
Now, I'm going to make you honorary assistant to Jim Vansatter. So you're going to go out there and make this thing work, right?
I can be out there and help you guys out. I'm willing to.
You're in Brandon. You're my pair, Vito and Jim.
Vito and Jim. I love it. Well, Brandon, just like that. And Jim, with that being said, appreciate all your time. It's been a pleasure speaking with you as well.
If you ever have a hold of Phil on your schedule, call me back.
Awesome stuff. Nice talking to you. Have a great day. Thank you.
I was trying to get it how I live. I want them dead presidents. I want